And good morning. It's the Fantasy Basketball Podcast. And yes, it's a Friday. It's October 7th. Coming to you live this morning. Kind of a special show this morning. You know, we typically record on Thursdays, bring you a show once a week. But today, some breaking news came out. We decided, hey, let's just jump on. Let's do a quick podcast and talk about what came out. So obviously the big news of the day is all about the Draymond Green, Jordan Poole spat that really turned ugly. Some video has surfaced now of the actual incident. And it's a little bit disturbing. So we want to talk about it, talk about the ramifications in the NBA and also the ramifications in fantasy. So I'm going to bring in Big Game James. How are you this morning, James?
Ahoy, big morning so far. Big morning.
Big morning for sure. Now, I know that you and I kind of woke up this morning. We were sending texts back and forth, and I think we have some semblance of agreement and disagreement on exactly how this whole thing should be handled, our thoughts on it. And honestly, as I was firing up the show this morning, I was thinking to myself, this is so healthy. It really is, because I think that people need to hear some differing opinions. And I think one of the things that I've always found to be, successful just in my life with Dynasty League football is this idea of not having groupthink. And I think it's healthy. So let's talk about this a little bit. I'm going to give you the floor so you can chat a little bit about your thoughts on the Jordan Poole, Draymond Green fight.
So on multiple levels, this has the potential to really spiral out of control. So it looks like at the Warriors practice facility, they have either it's a specific camera crew, which I don't know if this one looks like it could be manned, but it also could be manipulated from a computer. So oftentimes at a practice facility, you'll have cameras that are set up around. Somehow this film footage got leaked to TMZ. It shows just a practice. There's no sound. So for anybody who hasn't seen it, you can go online. I mean, it's literally everywhere at this point. But Draymond Green's standing off to the corner. Jordan Poole is on the baseline. And you can obviously tell that there's chirping going back and forth. Now, what's crazy about this in so many different ways is the demeanor of the players that are on the court. They have their hands on their hips as if this isn't a shock to them. So whatever's going on between these two evidently has been going on for a while, so it's not new. You can obviously tell that Draymond is looking Jordan Poole straight in the face the entire time, and Jordan's just kind of looking him off. So, it's one of those things, and I understand the argument of there's no room for violence or a strike or anything like that. When we talked yesterday, the video footage hadn't come out. We thought it might have been a poke or something where a fist might have attempted to be thrown, or a slap or something like that. That is not what is evidence of this film. Draymond walks up to Jordan, gets right in his face, kind of goes chest to chest. Jordan shoves Draymond off as if to say, like, get off me. And then Draymond, I mean, it's a haymaker right hand that that really takes Jordan to the ground. At that point, a handful of players come in. But what's really telling about the situation is the handful of players and coaches that literally do nothing in this. So this says a lot by just the body language of not moving. So we talked yesterday on the show about the fact that Jordan Poole and Draymond Green are both looking for contracts. They're both eligible for contracts. Draymond's looking at probably his last significant contract. Jordan's looking for his first big contract. They won the championship last year. So there's two sides to this fence. The assumption is, just because of his track record, that Draymond is obviously the instigator, the starter of this. He had no right to punch him in the face. He's always doing stuff like this. That's just Draymond being Draymond. And my thought this entire time is not to defend Draymond Green or the punch or anything like that, because I know when we were talking about us talking offline, you and a couple of people on Twitter were just vehement on the punch wasn't necessary and not acceptable. I don't disagree with that. What my point was is obviously something was said that led to that kind of retaliation. Because if you think of how many times Draymond's been irritated, obviously, I mean, you could see the demeanor and the interaction between him and Kevin Durant when he was on the team. It never resulted in anything like this. So I don't think that, you know, Jordan's just sitting here as a victim of just being in the wrong place at the wrong time. This is something that's been brewing for a while. It came out that the Warriors were going to deal with it internally, and the initial conversation was that they were not going to suspend Draymond. So now the question is, does the league step in and say, now the footage is out, shouldn't have been out, but the footage is out, and now they have to do something? If that's the case, I mean, we could be looking at a significant suspension for Draymond, who, I mean, I'm definitely not taking him my first 4 rounds of fantasy, but he was drafted. What does that do to Jordan Poole? He was definitely a top 10 shooting guard. We talked about it. Oh, he was just outside our top 10. And what does that do to a team that won the championship last year, had aspirations of returning? I think this is a lot of turmoil that was kept behind closed doors that's now out in the open. So everybody's got to have their hand in it, their 2 cents. It's got to make the news wires, which is why we're doing this show today. So it has a lot of ramifications, but I don't know that enough information is going to get out to kind of clear Draymond, if in fact there is anything that can clear him. I just don't think you blow like this unless it's something that's been piling up for a while. So this could be huge. And if you think about the 2 teams that are in the finals this year, what's happened off the court for both of them? I mean, obviously Boston's wasn't to this level, but this is pretty significant. It just completely changes the landscape for title contention, how teams are going to play, and it's a very wide open race on both ends now.
No, I don't disagree with you there. Yesterday during the show, we were talking about this spat between the 2 of them, and this is obviously before we saw any of the footage. And we were just kind of joking around like, oh, Jordan Poole may have deserved it, and this, that, and the other. And I even went as far as putting out a tweet that has since been deleted because I was embarrassed about it, about, did Jordan Poole really deserve this? I didn't. It just didn't really register with me that it would look like it did. I've seen, look, I'm a basketball coach. I've seen spats in practice. Now, granted, it's high school, but the same type of thing. They happen. You are talking about grown men who are very, very competitive. And you're talking about Draymond Green, who you talk about him being irritated. Well, he's irritated every day. That's just the way that he operates. Pushing and shoving and spats between teammates isn't a bad thing. It's actually a healthy thing because it just proves that there is something it's something that's important to you. Okay. You're passionate about something, and that stuff happens in the heat of the battle. However, what Draymond Green did yesterday is completely and totally over the line. So I thought about, like, when I saw it this morning, there were a few things that came to mind. One was Latrell Sprewell and PJ Carlesimo, when that was caught on tape and Sprewell is choking his coach. The other one is Bobby Knight and his player when he went up and grabbed him by the throat. Those 2 things came to mind first. But then my mind traveled way back. And I pride myself on being kind of a basketball historian. I've watched the sport and loved the sport since I was a kid. And I immediately thought of Kermit Washington and Rudy Tomjanovich. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, I would tell you right now, go out on YouTube and take a look. No. I know you're shaking your head right now, James, but here's the thing. There is a brotherhood amongst players. Okay, there is. And this isn't the late 80s, early 90s where fighting is condoned. You look at this spat here, and I get it. Like when you go back and you look at the Rudy Tomjanovich Kermit Washington fight, Rudy's running up towards Kermit Washington full speed, and he gets clocked in the head. That punch, though, that I saw from Draymond was violent in nature. That was not something that was meant to be, a slap in the face. That was something that could have adversely affected that man's career. It could have affected his life. Okay, and I get I get that it's a physical sport. There's violence involved, but that crossed the line. It just crossed the line for me. So it's an indictment on Golden State. I think when they were saying, well, Draymond may not get suspended. How can that not have a rift in the locker room? Especially because this morning I'm looking online and Steve Kerr said that Poole did nothing to deserve it. Steph Curry came to Poole's defense and said Poole did nothing to deserve it. So it's not like guys are standing behind Draymond here and saying, hey, you know what? Jordan's been yapping his mouth and he came in with an attitude. Steve Kerr said as much this morning. Like that is not the case. So now, granted, did they get in some type of verbal spat? Yeah, you can see it on the video. Poole is probably saying something and it's likely something inappropriate. Draymond takes it the wrong way, whatever it might be. But you cannot do that to another player. No, I mean, and your own teammate, that crosses a line that those guys have. I mean, that group of players, I mean, there's a reason why there's a players union. They really are truly a brotherhood. And if you don't respect a fellow human being enough to stop yourself from really doing something that could adversely affect their life, I would have no room for you. I would have no room for you on my roster. I just wouldn't. So I'll give it back to you. I know that you're shaking your head a little bit and you don't agree with some of it, but I don't think the story here is, did Jordan Poole, do something to deserve it? I think the story here is Draymond Green is off the rails. He's completely off the rails. Like, he's said things that have been controversial before. He's done things that have been controversial on the court. This crosses a line that he's never crossed before. You're talking about essentially assaulting a teammate. So this is, I think, uncharted waters. And I think for Golden State, this is a really, really bad look. So now that this video is out, yeah, they're probably going to go back and suspend him. But the fact that they weren't going to do it before, I think just leaves a massive amount of egg on their face.
Okay, so this is going to sound like the defense of Draymond Green, but a couple things I just want to circle back. Number one, I don't even put the Kermit Washington, Rudy Tomjanovich in the same class. Rudy had absolutely no idea that a physical altercation was going to take place. Kermit cold-cocked him blindside sucker punch.
But there was a fight at half court though, and Rudy's coming. There was a fight. Well, no, there was a fight at half court over a rebound, and Rudy was running in at the defense of a team. Like he knew that there was a fight that was breaking out. He didn't think he was going to get cold cocked.
Yeah, that's a completely different thing. That in what happened today, I don't even put it not in the same arena, not even in the same zip code. I don't even put them in the same league. Those two are completely different. When the defense of Kerr and Steph Curry, when they were talking about Jordan Poole, that was in references to whether or not Jordan Poole the entire offseason, because Chris Haynes reported that this entire offseason that Poole's demeanor has changed leading up to this contract negotiation. So what they were refuting was the article that came out and the inclination, or the insinuation that Poole's attitude had changed leading up to his contract negotiations. It wasn't whether or not he deserved getting punched in the face. They kept that closed wraps. And then they went on as far to say that that it wasn't going to deter the team moving forward, and then that team would have included Draymond on it. So that's my defense of those conversations. Lastly, I'm not out here saying that he deserved to get hit in the face. What I'm saying is if everybody around, when you watch that video, if he was off the rails, and if it wasn't something that had been ongoing, and he starts walking over to Jordan Poole, not a single player, not a single coach tried to get in between them. Not one. So if he was that off the rails and off hinged. And second, would it have changed your opinion if that same camera footage that was out there had come out when Michael Jordan punched Steve Kerr in the face in practice, which galvanized their team according to all records and accounts that anybody looks back and you watch The Last Dance? If the footage would have come out that showed Jordan lay Kerr on his ass the same way this just happened, would it have completely changed the debate on Michael Jordan and being the greatest player of all time?
I don't know. I haven't seen it. I don't know. So I think that's a valid question, but I don't think that. And again, we're talking about some different eras here, but regardless, like, was Jordan right in doing that? No, he wasn't. And you can talk about how it galvanizes a team. Okay, but
no, that's what they say. I'm not saying it galvanizes the team. What I'm saying is to turn the cheek to the fact that there's a precedence for this having happened behind closed doors. This one happens to come out and is on video. You have players You have coaches saying this happens. You said it yourself that it happens. Maybe not to this degree, but if this isn't the first time the punches have been thrown in practice, so it's a case of leaked video footage. And what do we do now that you have a team saying we're not going to punish or we're not going to suspend? But now you got the league stepping in, you've got social media stepping in, and now you have the court of public opinion on your doorstep. How do the Warriors deal with that when initially their decision was we're just going to move forward and kind of deal with it internally and try to get past it?
Well, and I don't disagree. But altercations do happen. They happen at practice all the time. I'm not disputing that at all. But this doesn't happen at practice all the time. This is different. This is something where, and you're talking about how the Warriors didn't step in and they kind of watched. Nobody expected that to happen. I mean, nobody would have expected Draymond to do that. There are sometimes, and I've seen it before, where, guys are pushing and shoving, and you think, okay, well, let's just let them blow their tops. We'll pull them away. We'll move forward. We'll shake hands, and everything will be fine. I don't think anybody on that Warriors team thought Draymond would go that far to actually punch him in the face like that. Even after he throws the punch.
Even after he throws the punch, look how many people are just standing there with their hands on their hips.
That's on them.
That's
yeah.
There's no shock there. I guess that's my issue is if there was shock and everybody's running, right, to pull them apart, this can't happen, this can't happen. You've got numerous players that literally have their hands on their hips. So as far as no one thought Draymond would do it, I argue that no, Jordan knew this was coming and you asked for it and then it got hit because you got that body language tells me that they weren't shocked at all that this was happening. I mean, some of them didn't even turn around.
But is that that's not an indictment on Poole, though? That's not an indictment like to say, well, okay, Poole, you asked for it. That's more of an indictment on Draymond where they're looking at it and saying, if that is the case and if they weren't surprised by it, then you have a player who you think could potentially just go off the rails and whack a teammate like that. You don't want that guy on your team. You just don't.
Well, this is definitely where we disagree, because my thing is if I'm on a squad with someone who's chirping and chirping and chirping, and someone says, hey, if I say, hey man, I'm telling you what, keep your mouth shut. And again, this isn't saying that anybody deserves to get punched in the face, so don't conflate the two. But when if I'm keeping my hands on my hips, it's like I tried to tell you. So you might know that you're gonna get hit. But you might know you're going to get hit because somebody just keeps pushing that button that you're going to get hit. That doesn't justify it being done, but there was no shock. So to say that you have an unhinged player or this and the other, if that's commonly known across the roster and the coaching staff, and then a guy keeps chirping and pushing the button that's going to blow. He hasn't blown. And what season is this for him right now? His 10th season, 11th season? He hasn't blown yet.
We're making the assumption though that Poole has said or done something historically and here in practice that has teed this off.
We're also making assumptions that Draymond Green is garbage because Draymond Green's been garbage his entire career and everybody hates him and everything that comes out of his mouth. He's guilty right out of the gate. And I've never liked him. Let the record show that I've never liked Draymond Green, just because I feel like he talks a lot and he wouldn't talk as much if he didn't have Steph and Clay behind him. So that's my framework.
But I don't think he does now. I don't, because what I've read this morning is Curry is not defending him. Curry is not defending Draymond's action at all, and Curry is saying that Poole did nothing to deserve this. And Steve Kerr is right next to Curry on this front. So I think more information is going to come out. I think we're going to get more of a context to this. I think it's a fun debate. I think that there are lots of different angles to this. I think that there's a rift inside that Warriors organization. I do think that now that the video is out, ramifications for Draymond are going to be a lot more harsh than they would have been. It was just going to be an apology, and now it's not. So this story is far from over. For sure. So we'll see kind of where this thing goes. So from a fantasy perspective, I think that there are going to be some far-reaching ramifications of this too. We just don't know exactly what yet. So James, parting thoughts before we take off.
As a coach, what happens to the camera crew in this scenario? Because the thing is, this is something that obviously the Warriors didn't want leaked because they were going to deal with it internally. Now you got the court of public opinion and the league that's probably going to force you to do something more drastic. You've got a camera crew that records this. Do you take action on the camera crew? Because then if you take action on the camera crew, then essentially what you're saying is you're trying to cover up something that you wish hadn't gotten out. So what do you do in a scenario if you're the Warriors and you're recording these games and the fact that the footage got leaked? Because this isn't more of a systemic issue. We don't need to talk about that here.
Right.
But that's pretty significant that this video got out.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And credit to TMZ. How do they get this stuff? Like every single like they get everything. It's unbelievable. I think you bring up a really valid point here, because you can't go and, essentially fire the messenger here. It just doesn't work that way, because if the Warriors went back to that camera crew and fired them, you can bet, you want to talk about egg on your face, that's going to be worse. That's like egg, bacon, hash brown, sausage, is like an entire breakfast platter on your face, because they're going to look like they're covering it up. You can imagine, though, I mean, there are going to be different rules and protocols in place. Who knows how it got out? Maybe it was a cameraman, maybe it was somebody in the front office. Who knows how they got it and who leaked it? But you can bet that it is like hashtag witch hunt this morning at the Golden State practice facility to find out exactly how that got out. So it's going to be tough for them to deal with that in any way other than internal. I will say this, and it's just being more and more difficult. What happens in practice should stay in practice. It should be behind closed doors between guys. That being said, obviously we've talked ad nauseum about this particular incident, but you're right. I would be steamed if I'm the Warriors and this thing leaked out, because now you've taken an incident that they could have handled internally and you've made it something that's going to be in the court of public opinion, and you are never going to win that case.
Lastly, we know that Draymond's part of the new media, and I'm using the air quotes here. My first question to you is, do you see him apologizing? And B, do you see him discussing this at length on his podcast to try to kind of justify the situation?
Ooh, I think Draymond will apologize on his podcast, because Draymond may be a lot of things, but Draymond's not stupid. And I think that Draymond he's smart enough to know that public opinion will not be on his side today. So I think he'll be smart enough to go through and apologize. I don't think he's going to get into the details, because I think that if he does, he's smart enough to know that he's going to put his foot in his mouth, and I think he'll just leave it. I think he'll just essentially say, hey, there was an incident at practice. I apologized. I went over the line. We're going to move on as a team, and things get heated. And I think he's going to leave it at that. What about you?
Yeah, I think we're going to be hard pressed. This is going to be the test that I think Draymond's looking for to determine, okay, who are you riding with? Are you riding with me, who brought you 4 rings? Or are you riding with this guy who kind of rode our coattails for a ring? And if you're not going to back me, then I'm not apologizing at all. This guy's running his mouth and nobody did anything to stop it. And if you don't want my services, I can go someplace else. Because regardless of what happens here, even if he's suspended, he doesn't sit on the wire if they waive him or drop him. He doesn't sit on there for a minute. I mean, he's getting picked up regardless. And I think he knows that. So we talk about being intelligent. I don't think he apologizes for anything, because I don't think he truly feels like those guys, Clay or Steph, have had his back like to that level. And it's one of these ride or die situations ever.
But he doesn't think anybody has his back.
Yeah,
ever.
I think there's a lot of this tongue in cheek, kind of rolling your eyes and this, that, and the other. This is that whole supreme confidence piece, and we talked about this yesterday. But I think Draymond thinks that we don't win 4 rings unless I'm here. I don't necessarily disagree with that at all. I don't like him, but I don't think they win without him. Jordan doesn't have a spot to be doing that, and I think that's what's rubbed Green the wrong way. And to tell him that you need to apologize in X, Y, and Z, I tell you what, there hasn't been anything that I've looked forward to more than the next Draymond Green podcast, because I think, depending on how the Warriors handle this now that the video's leaked, that could be really telling as to whether or not we see him finish this season, let alone his career in a Warriors jersey.
Well, and if anybody debates the fact that Draymond is a key cog into why they won all those championships, just look at that series they had against Cleveland where he's suspended. If he's not suspended, Cleveland doesn't have that world championship. I will go to my grave believing that. I don't think LeBron and Kyrie pull that off with Draymond still on on the roster for those games. So, you know what I'm looking forward to more than Draymond Green's next podcast, James?
Hit me with it.
Our next podcast. So our next podcast will be next Thursday. So make sure you join us. And hey, it's October 7th and things are already getting crazy. It's the fourth quarter, James. Off we go. Okay. So for James, I'm Ken. Special edition today. We'll see you next time on the Fantasy Basketball Podcast.